Children's doctors are calling for smacking children to be banned in England and Northern Ireland. It is already illegal in Scotland and Wales. One children's doctor said that the current laws are unjust and dangerously vague, and that they create a grey area where some forms of physical punishment may be lawful. Now, the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health has warned that children who experience physical punishment are nearly 3 times as likely to develop poorer mental health. But nearly a third of British adults think that smacking your child can actually improve their behaviour. And at the minute, the government says that they've got no plans to change the current laws. Lynn, what do you think? Were you smacked as a child?
See, that's what I was going to say. I can only speak from my own personal opinion. I don't have children, however, I come from a two-parent home where neither of them were born here. My mother was born in Pakistan, my father was born in Barbados. And in the Caribbean, discipline is crucial to a child's development. And sometimes that does include a smack. Now, my dad, just the simple, authority of him, he didn't need to resort to smacking me as much as my mum did, but he smacked me once. And I absolutely deserved it.
What did you do?
I was 14 and I had a friend who was 16, and I don't know, it was really horrible thinking about it now. She had a boyfriend who was 25. And we went to his house. We were just watching movies, playing PlayStation, and it got to midnight and I hadn't gone home at 14. Oh. And my dad, I don't know how, he found out where it was. He banged the door, the guy opened the door, and he dragged me into the car. And he said, "I am so disappointed," and he gave me a slap. And I was so shocked, but I never did it again. And I just think it's also the idea that parents can have that discipline. I think there's a massive difference between a smack, where you know it's a discipline method, to what you did was wrong and I want to make sure you never do it again because I love you, versus beating up your child or abusing your child.
There is the interesting point, I think, for me in that whole conversation, Lynn, is you said that your dad has done this out of love. So what are we teaching children about what love is? Love is physical violence?
No, I think what we need to understand is there are consequences. Now, let's say, for example, and I've worked with many families where there is hardly any discipline, and I've worked with families where there are a lot of discipline. And you can see the difference in the behaviour, the education attainment, you can see the respect levels. If you go to certain countries, and I'm not, again, we do have extremes where it's too much, but if you go to Caribbean islands, if you go to certain African countries and Asian countries, the discipline, even when they come here, when their parents were born there, is far better, along with educational attainment. Now, when I work with the families who have no discipline, the children are often wayward, and I would often ask my parents, "Why are you so strict?" And they would say to me, now I'm an adult, "Well, look at all of the children that had no discipline, and where are they now?" Not to be disrespectful, but they're not at a place where they should be.
I mean, it's an interesting concept, and we see in the papers all the time, Ayesha, teachers complaining about the lack of discipline in the classroom and bad behaviour in the classroom. Is that because we're smacking our children less?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think I've got some sympathy with what you're saying, because I'm from an immigrant sort of background as well, but I do think times sort of change. And I think, for me, I think parents and teachers and society should do more on discipline, but I think it's about kind of modernising the toolkit of what discipline looks like. And I suppose for me, I mean, I don't know if making this illegal is quite the right thing, because I was looking at the stats in Scotland. So Scotland made this illegal a couple of years ago, and they don't even record any statistics on it, so we don't really know what the effect has been. But from the principle of it, my general thing is, if you are a bigger person with a littler person, you shouldn't raise your hand to them. That's just how I feel about it. I think there's other ways, and I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of parents are not disciplining their children, and I think that is being seen. We're seeing that in schools, we're seeing that in our shops, we're seeing it on buses, we're seeing it everywhere in society. But I think there's different ways of disciplining your children. I also worry that if you say that, you wouldn't say to a woman, right, just to show them a bit of love or discipline, just a light cuff kind of thing. We would, because we've moved on in terms of domestic violence and hitting women.
Well, adult to adult, it is unacceptable.
But that's why I kind of think for a child it's unacceptable. My other anxiety about it is, what does it teach children about violence and how to sort things out? If you have to raise your hand to sort a problem out, I don't think that instills a good sense of...
Part of
This
this
is like the
research does
levels,
suggest
though.
that aggression does increase in children that have been smacked.
Yeah, but we're looking at the levels. Like, let's take a 6 or 7-year-old and there's an open fireplace, and this is a, extreme danger. And if you've said, don't do that on 3 occasions, and they continue to do it, and you go, I said don't do that, that's not, I wouldn't call that violence, but there is something that you can feel that would say, if you put your hand in the fire, it's going to feel far worse than what I just did.
But can't you instill that discipline in another way, as Ayesha is saying, other than a physical assault on the child?
Well, take, for example, when my dad hit me, previously he would do something called, when I was far younger, called flicky wicky. And that was when he would get his fingers and he'd flick my ears. Now, it didn't hurt that much, but it was to say, stop doing that. And it worked.
Well, almost as, because sometimes children get so focused on what they're doing, they need to come out of that, to try and snap your brain back into listening to him.
A child, it's saying, obviously, with the violence with adult to adult, you shouldn't have to do that to an adult. I'm saying, when a child is growing up, they test boundaries. It's about how they navigate in the world. And I think it's important that parents feel empowered. Of course we need to look at abuse. That's completely a different topic. But is there any reason as to, when you have certain countries or immigrant parents that come over, that they are empowered to discipline their children how they have been, why those children, in terms of attainment, come out better? There has to be a conversation for that.
Well, let's go to the calls and speak to Desmond from Bradford. How do you feel about smacking?
Hello, team. How are you? I'm just a little bit nervous here, right?
Oh, well, no need to be nervous, Desmond.
I've had a couple of strokes as well, and so just be there with me once I get going out. I never stop. Yeah, man. Right, check this out. Right. I do think that smacking children should be banned, because the reason why I think it should be banned is because children will grow up to have violence. Not only will they have violence, they'll have problems as well. And personally, I've had 4 kids. Now, I've had 4 kids. They're beautiful. 2 boys, 2 girls. Been blessed. Yeah, man. Now then, my 4 kids, whenever they did anything wrong, I never smacked them.
What did you
Whenever they did anything wrong, what I did was I used to tell them, start from the beginning, explain everything they've done wrong, and also the people who are upset and everything. Trust me, by the time I got to the end, they were crying their eyes out, and they won't be doing it again. So I'd explain to children, I think it's much better than smacking them, because parents will lose their temper, not only smack them, punch them, kick them, and things like that. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's part of this argument, Desmond. Thank you very much for your call. That is part of the argument, that once you legislate that smacking is an acceptable form of punishment for children, there is a slippery slope, isn't there, to say, oh, it was only a smack because they were going to touch the oven, or it was only a smack because they were going into a cupboard they're not allowed into. I mean, you then can't legislate for abuse as quickly and as easily. And as Desmond said, shouldn't we be talking to our children? Shouldn't we be trying to get them to cognitively understand why what they're doing is wrong?
Yeah, it's 100% a last resort. And I actually think it's counterproductive when smacking is used or utilised too often, because that's when the resentment between the child and the parent will occur. But like I said, I regularly visit my home country, Barbados. There is smacking there, it's not illegal. I don't think it's used like hugely. However, the amount of respect that young people have for adults and for each other and within the school playground, in classroom, is far beyond what we're seeing here. And we have seen that discipline. Even when I heard about Childline when I was growing up, and I was a little bit, demonstrative towards my mum, or growing pains, if you want to call it that, I would regularly say, you can't do anything to me. You can't smack me. I would go and call Childline. Parents are not feeling empowered that they can discipline their children. I'm not saying to beat your child. I'm not saying to regularly smack them. I'm saying we shouldn't be taking away parents' autonomy to be able to discipline if they have to.
OK, Alan from Oxfordshire, how do you feel about smacking?
Oh, good morning, all. One doesn't condone excessive smacking, but to ban it outright is a mistake. If society takes away parental control, then they cannot blame parents for children being unruly.
Does control have to come in the form of physical violence, though, Alan?
No.
No.
As I said, I don't condone excessive smacking, but
Yes, but when is it excessive?
well, when you, as the law already would say, it's illegal
Well, it's
to.
quite wishy-washy, Alan.
Well, not really. A child from day one wants to know where the limits are, to draw the line, and they appreciate understanding that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have great-grandchildren, and our children have always been polite, and I have, on odd occasions, smacked them.
For what, Alan? What sort of reasons have you smacked them?
Well, when they haven't done as they're told, and one gets to you try, well, just a tap. I mean, our second child, I slapped her once on the back of her leg, and that's the only time she's ever had a smack.
And what was it for? And how old was she?
Oh, I can't remember her age, but she was quite young, and she wouldn't do as she was told, and I slapped her once. In actual fact, she walked from the room that I was in into the next room where the rest of the family were, and she collapsed because as I'd slapped her, she'd held her breath and walked into the other room and then just fell down. And of course I was chastised, what have you done?
Alan, it does sound like potentially it had more of an impact on your child than perhaps you even appreciate now.
Well, no, I mean, it was obviously she was surprised.
Right.
And just sort of held her breath. But society cannot say to parents, it's your fault if they take away all their controls.
Well, they're not taking away your voice. They're not taking away your authority. I mean, what other methods would you use?
They don't want you to raise your voice to a child. They don't want you to smack a child. I'm talking about the odd smack.
Yeah.
And if you grasp a child, I mean, they'll be saying, you can't do this.
Smacking has been illegal.
I used to get lines at home as well.
Well, I mean, yeah, you get that at school. You don't see teachers smacking children, and they most of the time keep a sort of discipline, although increasingly that's been difficult.
Well,
but Ayesha, I mean, smacking has been illegal in Scotland for a while now. So parents are obviously using other methods. You've got sort of friends. Do you know any other kind of methods they seem to be using?
But I just think modern parenting is changing. I think the generation that Alan talks about, and I'm sure there's many people that have been part of that generation, and as you were saying, in terms of, immigrant families as well. But I even see with my own friend circle, even those who are the children of immigrants who got leathered as they were kind of growing up, they are taking a different approach with their own parenting. Maybe that's overcompensating for what they've had, but they are using different methods because I think ultimately, we're all evolving as people and as human beings and as a society. I go back to my analogy about women. I mean, the story that Alan said, and you could have put a woman in there 50 years ago, that would have been fine. We had that in James Bond films. She wasn't doing what she was told, a playful cuff, and she was good as gold after that. And that was like a mentality, right? It was fine. It was the way things was. It was the way things were like 50 years ago. So things do change, and I think for a lot of parents, they themselves will feel bad about raising their hand to inflict violence on this little thing that they love and they worked very hard to have.
Yeah. Alan, though, thank you very much for your call. Grace from London, do you think we need to ban smacking? Remember, it would just be England and Northern Ireland because it's illegal in Scotland and Wales.
No, I don't think we should ban smacking our kids. I have 4 kids and I come from a Caribbean background. I come from Guyana. But I think it should be like a last resort to smacking.
What about the problem of that making it
4
hard to identify abuse then, Grace? Because one smack may not be seen as abuse, but several smacks, maybe that is abuse. It's quite difficult to judge when discipline becomes abuse in that situation.
No, if you're gonna smack them different places and all over the skin, I think that is abuse. I wouldn't abuse my kids personally, no.
It's just interesting because everyone has a sort of different take on what is abuse and what is good discipline. Grace, thanks for your call. Susan from Lincolnshire, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, I tried not to smack my son. All right, he's had a smack now and again on the BTM, but he once kept, I used to send him, right, go to bed now, so that we didn't have go through that thing. But then he came down one day and he said, do you know, I like it when you send me to bed because I can read in peace and quiet.
Great. Everyone's a winner. You get peace and quiet. He gets peace and quiet. He's reading and not watching TV. I don't see, is there a problem with this then, Susan?
Oh, no, there was no problem, but it was a good punishment because he's become an excellent reader.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just see that as an absolute win, although if you're sending him up without dinner, I'm sure people will think that's abusive, and I think this is just something that maybe society needs to continually discuss about what we think is appropriate and what we don't think is appropriate. But when you did smack your son, what was it for?
Oh, you know, it's so many years ago, and I know I felt so guilty afterwards. The bed was get upstairs to your bedroom was the thing that I always used then.
And I wonder whether the guilt comes because actually when you smacked, maybe there was a slight loss of control in your part?
Yes.
And I think that's probably the difference between whether it is a smack for discipline and whether it's a weakness in the parenting. Listen, and where parenting is not an exact science. We all have weak moments. I'm not criticising you in a way, Susan. I really appreciate how candid and honest you are. But again, a conversation to continue.
I think it's also hard for parents. I think a lot of parents who do smack their kids don't feel great afterwards, and I think they don't feel good about themselves afterwards.
I think that we do need to be mindful of enrage, and that's when it can fall over to the abuse. But when I was smacked by my mother was very religious. I was brought up in a very Christian, religious household, and before she used to smack me, she used to read me a passage from the Bible. And I would rather sometimes just going straight to the smack than having to hear a passage from the Bible. But it also made me feel like it's not done in anger. It's done because it's important. Now that I look back, I'm happy I was disciplined the way that I was disciplined.
Interesting.
And I'm not a violent person at all.
Susan.